Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. And it's just the night of Jum'ah. We are very blessed at the Islamic Center of Irving to have with us a special guest coming all the way from Reno, Nevada, our brother dear Dr. Rafik Beekun. Dr. Rafik Beekun is a scholar in several areas. He's been one of the key leaders who work in several organizations that today we see from MSA to Islamic Society of North America to NATE, and he has worked with various Islamic centers throughout the nation, and advising them and working on their plans and looking into their strategies. We have him talking again for this weekend. He was the Khatib, and inshallah today we'll be talking about leadership in Islam. Dr. Rafik visited us 13 years ago, and he is the one who worked with Shura at that time to put on our current vision and mission. So what's our vision statement? Anyone? I don't have dollars on me today, but Minar of Islam was, yes, this is what it is. So alhamdulillah, inshallah we'll all strive to be this way. Dr. Rafik is alhamdulillah happily married, and he has 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. They're all grown up, alhamdulillah, went through college, and if we give him the right environment, he may think to come back inshallah and retire again. So he's a professor at the University of Nevada, a management professor over there, and has spent time not just in the US but out there in different places in the globe advising on this topic. So inshallah, no further review inshallah. Ask Dr. Rafik inshallah to bless us with this toast inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. This presentation today is based on the book that Jamal Badawi and I wrote a few years ago on leadership from an Islamic perspective. And it's actually, and part of it is based on my new book, which is looking specifically at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and trying to develop an Islamic theory of leadership, which I called virtue-centered leadership. Not going to go in the whole book, but only one chapter in the book where I'm talking about, see, somebody needs to, shukran. One chapter in the book where I am talking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as servant leader. I think your projector just went out. So, is it waking up right now?
Yeah, it's waking up. Yeah,
okay. So it's going to come up right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So let me start. So in this presentation, inshallah, as you can see up there, my agenda for today is to first talk about a new definition of leadership. in the field of leadership. Then I'm going to talk about what servant leadership is and the mission of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And most importantly, what I'm going to talk about after that are 7 principles of servant leadership for Muslim leaders, for leaders of Islamic organization. And so first we're going to define what leadership is, what is servant leadership, Muhammad's mission, 7 principles of servant leadership, and ask ourselves a very simple question. Was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam an effective servant leader or not? And finally talk about a testimonial to his leadership. So when we talk about leadership, there is a new definition that just came out recently by Joseph Frost, where he talks about leadership as a dynamic of their leaders, and in which both are moved to higher levels of motivation, they both energize each other, and moral development. That in effect, and this is something very important, because in the Islamic approach to leadership, we've always talked about leaders as in effect being responsible for the moral development of their followers. And yet this is something relatively new in the field of leadership in the West. And I'm not going to talk about it today, but for those of you who have a management background, it's the difference between what we call transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is this idea that leaders can proactively and positively influence the development of the values in their followers. Transactional leadership basically says, I will do something for you in return for what you can do for me. Because you're paying me, I will do something for you. When you stop paying me, I will not do it anymore. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was both transactional and transformational. Clearly, in many instances, for example, he gave booty, for example, to his followers. At the same time, throughout his life, as you will see in a minute, he affected real intended change through transforming them. So when we look at the Quran, Allah actually talks about that in this ayah in Surah 33 verse 21. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. You, talking to us, have indeed in the apostle of Allah a beautiful pattern of conduct. And the Arabic translation by Yusuf Ali, as always, is almost always unidimensional. Because when you talk about the concept of uswatun hasana, we talk about this concept of hasan, it's the most beautiful, the most excellent. It's the superlative that Allah is using right here. For anyone whose hope, so now Allah is qualifying, for anyone whose hope is in Allah and the final day, and وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا, and who engages much in the praise of Allah. So, here, his mission, in fact, when we look at the Quran, his mission was one which basically, where Allah is saying that He is going to lead mankind. Alif Lam Ra, a book we have revealed unto you in order that you, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may lead mankind out of the depths of darkness, min adh-dhulumati ila nur, into light by the leave of their Lord, to the way of Him exalted in power, worthy of praise. So right there, when we look at the example of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a leader, his mission, amongst many others, is in effect to transform, to move the ummah, to move his followers from darkness, to move mankind, لِتُخْرِجَ النَّاسَ, and here talking about mankind, out of the depths of darkness into light by the leave of their Lord, and to the way exalted in power, worthy of praise. So this is addressed to the whole of mankind. So then the question is, what kind of servant leader is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Quran in Surah 68 verse 4 says it. This is addressed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah is saying, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. In fact, when Jamal Badawi and I were writing our book a few years ago on leadership from an Islamic perspective, I asked him, I said, in the Quran, where is the word ethics mentioned? And he said, there are 2 places in the Quran where that is mentioned. But one place is specifically related to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This one, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ. The word khuluq related to the word akhlaq. That when Allah is talking here, Allah is saying, and you, O Muhammad, stand as an exalted, khuluqin azim, exalted, the highest noble character, the most ethical form of leadership. So when we look at leadership in Islam, from the very beginning, leadership in Islam is about doing good. That's the essence of leadership. Leadership in Islam is about ethics. Leadership in Islam is about transparency in everything that you do. In everything that you do. Whether it be at your work, whether it be in the masjid, ethics is critical. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, part of the reason that Khadija radiallahu anha was interested in him, became interested in him, though he was younger than her, and though there were a lot of other people that wanted to marry her, what interested her was his ethics, his character, the way that he dealt when she sent him on trade, the ethical way that he dealt with other people, the transparent way that he dealt with other people. So, when we look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then akhlaq is at the core of Islamic leadership, wherever you are. So while teaching, and in fact this ayah in the Quran in Surah 62 verse 2, Allah in fact says that, you know, it is He who has raised up from amongst the unlettered a messenger of their own to do what? To recite His signs to them and to purify them, to teach them how to behave in the best possible way, in the most ethical way, and to teach them the book and wisdom. I have a lot to say about that, but I don't have time right here. Though before that, they were in manifest error. So while teaching his followers about values, when we have to, in a sense, go back to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam before he received wahi, and to the 2 terms that were used to call him, as-Siddiq and al-Amin. Right there, that sums up the character of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That in effect, at the core leadership values of Muslims are truthfulness, trust, and humility. There's a book that was published by Jim Collins from Stanford about 2003. And he went and he looked at the best of the leaders in corporate America. And he found only of the 11 corporations that were the most outstanding. Then he went and looked at their leaders. And he found that they all shared one common element that he called in his book From Good to Great, Level 5 leadership. And level 5 leaders are characterized by 2 things: humility and an iron will. Humility. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we will exemplify that in a minute. So his truthfulness was so well known that even after he, by the grace of Allah, claimed prophethood, that his enemies would still not accuse him of lying. So he modeled the behavior that he preached to others. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam always advocated for transparency, advocated for truthfulness, advocated for integrity of character. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is saying, promise me the following 6 things and I will promise you paradise. When you speak, speak the truth. When you give a promise, carry it out. When something is entrusted to you, do not breach the trust. Remember, at the same time that they were plotting to kill him, his enemies had entrusted him with their most precious possessions. Would you do that? Would you entrust to your worst enemy your most precious possession? That's because his character was centered around ethics, around trust. So when something is entrusted to you, do not breach the trust. Always keep chaste without being involved in any illicit intercourse. Keep your eyes away from what is unlawful and hold your hands back from the forbidden. So that is with respect to as-siddiq, telling the truth, being transparent. The second attribute that we often call Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by, or he was called by, is this idea of amin, al-amin. Now when we look at this notion of amana and amin, it's related to the same Arabic root, when you look at Fusha form of Arabic, as mu'min. So trust correlates with being, so trustworthiness correlates with being how strong of a believer you are. Being a believer implies de facto that you are not only truthful, that you are not only ethical, that you are also trustworthy, that you are, and it all goes together. So what does current leadership then say about effective leaders? So we look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that he was called Al-Amin, we know that he was called As-Siddiq, we know that Allah himself says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And then we look at Western approach to leadership. And we go like, well, they talk effective leaders being tall, effective leaders being great communicators, effective leaders being smart. What does current leadership anywhere talk about honesty? In a book that was published first in 1983, then replicated in 1997 by Tom Cousins and Barry Posner. Tom Cousins was a partner at McKinsey, and Barry Posner was the dean of the business school at UC Irvine. They went and looked first at 2,600 of the leaders of the most effective organizations in the United States. For-profit, not for-profit, different kinds, large, small, different industries. Then they replicated it with 20,000 leaders, and they asked their followers one very simple question: to what do you attribute the effectiveness of your leader? And this is what they said. The number one attribute of effective leaders is honesty and integrity. The West is finally discovering the truth behind what Allah said, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. For a long period of time, the West has talked about all kinds of leadership. When you look all the way from Socrates, when you look at Plato, when you look all the way to Kant and all these great Descartes and all those great philosophers, when you look at Stodgill and all the great researchers in leadership, it all comes back to the uswatun hasana. And what is at the core of his leadership qualities? Akhlaq, ethics. Right? Honesty and integrity. Being competent is also important. Having a vision is important. The whole set is important. but 83% of all respondents said, attributed the effectiveness of their leader to ethics, to being honest. So when we look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he is the ultimate example of what leadership should be. So focusing on that, then, let's look at servant leadership. Servant leadership is a very hot area in leadership right now. Again, it's like 1400 years later, the West is running after what Islam revealed from the beginning. So Robert Greenleaf was reading the Bible. He was a senior vice president at AT&T, and he saw the story of Hazrat Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, washing the feet of his disciples. The ultimate version of servanthood and humility. And he wrote this book called Servant Leadership. And this is how he defines a servant leader. The servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. The best test and the most difficult to remember, two tests, and we're going to apply it to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a minute. First, do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? And secondly, what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? One is in terms of those being served, and the other one is in terms of the followers. Do they become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely to become servants, more likely to become volunteers? Remember my khutbah today? I hope all of you went and signed up, right? Inshallah. And what is the effect if you are a servant, right? What is the effect of those that are most deprived? So, well, let's look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? You probably have seen this hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Sayyid al-Qawm khadimuhum. Before Robert Greenleaf even wrote his book, 1400 years ago, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the leader of the nation is their servant. The leader of the masjid, in effect, serves the needs of the community. So servant leadership in Islam has been there from the beginning. Servant leadership has been there well before Robert Greenleaf was writing about it. So what are the attributes of servant leadership? How do they manifest themselves in the example of our beloved and blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The first one is service before self. A servant leader, whether at work, whether in the masjid, it's very important when you do work for Allah that you remember before the work, during the work, and after the work to make sure that your niyyah is clean, your niyyah is clear. It's very easy for people to start Islamic work with the right niyyah, and in the middle of it, you know what we say, power, absolute power corrupts absolutely, that they get taken up by that position. They start thinking, this is mine and nobody should touch it. And there are examples of that in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, where Umar radiallahu anh, for example, went and burnt the door of a governor who forgot why he was appointed governor. Okay, so a servant leader is not interested in obtaining power, status, or wealth. He or she wishes to do what is morally right, even when it costs him, financially or otherwise. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not engage in self-adulation. So, how do we know that? Look at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, right? When during the writing The Prophet ﷺ had dictated the words, you know, this is from Muhammad, the messenger of God. And when the Quraysh delegate objected to it, no problem. His ego was not bruised. He was not doing it to advance himself. He had no problem saying, this is Muhammad, son of Abdullah. So he was a man of impeccable credibility, whom all, including the unbelievers, trusted. So when we look at, so Muhammad, son of Abdullah, and he said this, and this is something that we must never forget. This reported in Sahih Muslim by Abu Malih, right? A ruler, you can substitute leader there, who has been entrusted with the affairs of the Muslims and makes no endeavor, no attempt for their material and moral uplift, and is not sincerely concerned for the welfare, will not enter paradise with them. This is very important. And I used to be on the board of NATE, as on the, myself, Siraj Wahaj, and a bunch of, we used to go around the country solving conflicts. Where? In masajid. You would not believe people who are supposed to be working fi sabilillah, they have not, some of them, spoken to each other in 30 years. Or when you ask them, show me your books, it's like, no, I can't show you my books. Why do you want me to do? I cannot show you my books. You don't trust me. It's like you're attacking them personally. It's very important to remember that transparency is important, and most importantly, clarifying your niyyah is important, and making a sincere, being sincerely concerned about the welfare of the community. Otherwise, as the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is in Sahih Muslim, this is, you know, will not go to paradise. So, when you look at Muhammad ﷺ, neither wealth, nor status, nor name, nor reputation attracted him. He lived a simple and modest life, both in Mecca as a trader and also as the messenger of Allah, and later on as the head of state. This change in social status never affected him. You go around in masajid, somebody becomes president, it's like they can't bend anymore. You know what I'm talking about? You give them assalamu alaikum, they can't bend. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's like, okay. Inshallah it doesn't happen here, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Astaghfirullah. It's sad. It is sad, right? But look at the example of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. Even when he had become the head of state, it did not bring any change in his way of living. Umar radiallahu anh reported the Prophet ﷺ as saying, do not raise me up, do not exalt me as the Christians have exalted Jesus, son of Mary. I am just his servant. I'm Allah's servant. So call me Allah's servant and messenger. Anas radiallahu anh used to say, you know, sometimes when we get an invitation to dinner, we go like, what's on the menu? Like, if you're cooking goat biryani, I will show up. Right? If you're cooking chicken biryani, no chicken biryani, akhi. All right? Those people from the subcontinent know what I'm talking about, right? You're cooking couscous, what's that? What country is that from, right? We want to give our order before we get there. Anas radiallahu anh said that the Prophet ﷺ would accept an invitation to dinner, even when he was presented with barley bread, the coarsest form of bread, and soup, whose taste had changed. It was not fresh anymore. That's all that the people who invited him could afford. That is uswatun hasana. That is why we love this Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet ﷺ did not use his psychological size, as I've just pointed out. And this hadith reported by Anas. I am Allah's servant. I eat like a servant, and I sit like a servant. This is the humility of Muhammad ﷺ. So service before self. Secondly, individual consideration and attention. Muhammad ﷺ used that. The reason why I gave the khutbah today is because Islamic organizations, as I've said, and I have gone through all of them, whether it's CARE, whether it's ISNA, whether it's ICNA, whether it's MINA, all of them, and I've worked with Islamic organizations across the world. All of them, unless they encourage people to develop, unless they have the patience, like Muhammad ﷺ did for several years at Dar al-Arqam, to train people, to develop people. There are masajids that have been closed. They have been closed because there was nobody there to run the masjid. Don't make the same mistake. Encourage people to volunteer. Give them responsibility. Train them. Let them make mistakes. Let them learn from their mistakes. That's how you build the next generation of future brothers and sisters who will take over after we are no longer here. So, Muhammad ﷺ at Dar al-Arqam used Dar al-Arqam as an incubator. People like Umar, people like Abu Dhar, all these people went through that crucible. He reached out to his worst detractors. This is something that is really interesting with respect to Muhammad ﷺ. He welcomed even sinners, hypocrites such as Abdullah bin Ubay, known to be hostile to Islam and Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best before Islam are the best in Islam if they comprehend the religious knowledge. Look at Umar radiallahu anhu. On his way to kill Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So look at Umar radiallahu anhu before he became a Muslim, and look at Umar radiallahu anhu after he became a Muslim. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never gave up on him. He made dua, and Allah granted his dua. So he reached out to his worst detractors. Each companion felt that he or she had his complete attention. He treated them kindly but differently. He treated Abu Bakr a certain way, Umar radiallahu anhu a certain way, Uthman a certain way. And for example, Abu Dhar. Abu Dhar came from a tribe of thieves. The man was a thief. Then he discovered Islam. And when he was a new Muslim, he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, and this hadith is reported by Abu Dhar himself in Sahih Muslim. And I always say that had he asked what I'm going to tell you right now in a minute, Umar radiallahu anh, for what he asked Muhammad ﷺ, he would not have been around to narrate this hadith, because Umar, whenever somebody did not do it right, he had like only one answer, and usually it had to do with his sword. So, when he was a new Muslim, Abu Dhar goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, O Prophet of Allah, will you not appoint me to a position of authority? Now we know they had a hadith, right, where the Prophet ﷺ says that if somebody asks for a position of authority and gets it, he will not be blessed in his actions, even if he were to get that position. But if he doesn't ask it, then Allah will bless him in it. So having that hadith in the background, what does Muhammad ﷺ do? Look at the beauty of his leadership style. In the hadith, and this is Abu Dhar reporting it himself. He says, the Prophet ﷺ stroked my shoulder. And he said, Abu Dhar, you are weak, and authority is an amana. Leadership is an amana. We don't simply give it to anybody who asks for it. And then in another version of the hadith, it is said that the Prophet ﷺ concluded the hadith by saying, and on the day of judgment, that leadership, those responsibilities will be like holding a piece of charcoal on fire in your hand. So when we look at Muhammad ﷺ then, he did not insult him. He told him the truth. Each companion felt that he or she had his complete attention. He treated them differently but fairly. Anas bin Malik reported that Muhammad ﷺ had a total understanding of the human condition and showed empathy with the very poor. So for example, this woman, he reports, any woman in Medina could come to the Prophet ﷺ, take him by the hand anywhere she wanted, and he would help her finish their chores, and this is reported in Sahih Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ knew that this deen, remember what the verse of the Quran said, to lead mankind out of darkness into the light. In Islam, there is no elitism. We cannot say, you are from Pakistan, therefore you should get the message. You are from Africa, you shouldn't. Or you are from a certain social status, you get the message, and you are from a lower status, and you don't. The seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, as you know, those in power in Mecca were very disturbed by how this deen was spreading. And once they came to him and said, they wanted to make a deal. If you assign to us a day when others, especially those poor ones, will not be present, we may talk to you about accepting your religion. These people, they despised the poor Muslims like Bilal, Ammar, and Habab, and sought special treatment. Muhammad ﷺ never agreed to it. In Islam, there is no nepotism. You cannot treat some people some way and other people another way. This deen is for everybody. This message that Muhammad ﷺ is spreading was a universal message, and it's not to him and it's not to us to decide who should or should not get it. And that's why in Surah Al-An'am, in Surah 6, verse 52, Allah is saying, do not send away those who call on their Lord morning and evening, seeking His face. The third attribute of servant leadership is, you know, when you talk to somebody, right, they have their iPhone, and astaghfirullah, a Galaxy S5. I'm an iPhone kind of guy, right? They have their iPhone in front of them, and they are on Facebook probably. They are on Facebook probably, right? And you're talking to them, and they're like, yes, Brother Rafik. They're not looking at you. They're even reciting a verse of the Quran to you while they're surfing the net. Muhammad ﷺ, when anybody would talk to him, he would stop whatever he was doing, turn to face that person, and totally focus on that person. He turned to face whoever was talking to him, and he would stay quiet, because being accepting does not, you know, as a leader, if you are looking at your pad, if you're looking at your iPhone, what message does it give to that brother? That he or she, brother or sister, is not important enough to stop whatever you're doing to communicate with them. Muhammad ﷺ, the most important person on this earth, would stop whatever he was doing and focus on that person. And He would stay quiet while first listening to the queries from his followers and then respond appropriately. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu reported that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, let him say something good or keep quiet. This is what, I'm not going to talk about this very quickly, but this is the difference between what we call single loop learning versus double loop learning. You know, some people, you talk to them, or that, you know, some brother is talking to the Amir, and he says, that's interesting feedback, I'll keep it in mind. A year later, you ask him, he has no clue what you're talking about. Even next week, you ask him, Ya akhi, you know how busy I am. You know, and I don't want, you know, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used double loop learning. You know, that's interesting feedback. It could be a wake-up call that I'm working on the wrong project. I'll investigate further and act on it. Look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the Battle of Badr. He is arrayed the whole army. And Al-Hubab ibn al-Mundhir comes to him and says, is this from you or is this from Allah? And he advises him on where to put the army, how to drain the wells closest to the enemy. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam not only listens to him, but followed his advice. In matters of deen, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a direct line to Allah. But there was never a time that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought shura that he did not follow through. That's double loop feedback. That is a true servant leader. The fourth attribute of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and now I realize I've only about 4 minutes left, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for, you know, we've talked about Al-Amin, we've talked about Hajri Aswad. He was a man of his word. He never cheated or stole from anybody. He spoke the truth by the way in which he joined the Muhajirin and the Ansar into a single unified entity. After his settlement in Medina, he created trust. When imbued with the love of and need to serve Allah. See, at the core of it, think about it. Why are you here? Why am I here? We are here for one very simple reason. Because of the love that we have for Allah. The love that we have to serve Allah. We only exist to serve Allah. Our differences, whether we have an Audi or whether we have a Ford Escort, whether we have 20,000 foot square house, a 1,000 foot square house, whether we're wearing a 5,000 suit or like Umar radiallahu anh, a thawb with 13 holes in it. At the end of it all, everything we own, everything we have stops at the edge of our grave. And the only thing that goes forward is our deeds, our service to Allah. And so, when imbued with the love and need to serve Allah, authentic servant leaders can never be losers and don't ever see themselves as being losers or serviles. Look at Umar radiallahu anh. This is an amazing story. Umar radiallahu anh is walking towards Jerusalem with his servant to receive the keys to the city. And you know the story, right? And they're taking turns. And when they're getting inside of Jerusalem, it was the servant's turn to ride their animal, and for Umar radiallahu anh to walk. And he says, maybe you should ride the animal because people would see us. And Umar says something that is amazing. Umar says, first he says no. And he says, the honor of being a Muslim is sufficient for both of us. The honor of being a Muslim is sufficient for both of us. How many of us, myself included, take being a Muslim as granted? We've never had to fight for this deen as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, as our brothers and sisters in Syria have, as our brothers in Egypt or in Turkey or in Thailand have. We've been given it on a platter. And yet, when we ask brothers and sisters, please do something for this masjid, volunteer, try something. You see a piece of trash in the parking lot, pick it up. You go to the bathroom, somebody done something, and you just go like, well, there's somebody else to clean it. Take ownership of this deen. Take ownership of this deen. The fifth point is, don't make this deen difficult. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I have several, but I'm going to stop after this one because I think I have to stop at 9:15. You know, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a servant leader, did not make this deen impossible. Very often, you see people, they go like, well, your beard doesn't get down to here, or you're not dressed a certain way, and they drive young people out of masajid. In my country, where I came from, some of you are going like, what country is that, brother? Mauritius, near South Africa. In some masajid, if you go in without a topi, right, they will drag you by your ears and make you go outside. Go outside. You're not praying here today. So this young brother never comes back. He never comes back. Or he's praying, he's making mistakes. Instead of gently correcting him, now you have 10 people telling him how a mushrik he is. The Prophet ﷺ said, make things easy and convenient, and don't make them harsh and difficult. Aisha radiallahu anha, in fact, this hadith is reported by Aisha radiallahu anha in Sahih Bukhari. She narrated that whenever Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the choice of two matters, he would choose the easier path. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used gradualism and incrementalism in bringing people to Islam. He did not make this deen difficult. We make this deen difficult. We make it impossible for people. We turn people away from this deen. The last point I want to make to conclude is, as a servant leader, 9/11 happened, Patriot Act happened, a lot of things have happened to us in the Muslim community in the United States. But at the end of the day, when you look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never gave up. Once, when the Muslims were being boycotted, if you remember, and they were starving to death, one of the companions came to him and lifted his shirt and showed him that he had a stone tied around his tummy. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam lifted his shirt and showed him he had 2 stones tied around his tummy. As a leader, he did more than what he asked others to do. And he never gave hope. So the last example is this. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you remember, during the Battle of Mu'tah in 629 CE, the Muslim army consisted of 3,000 soldiers. The opposing Byzantine forces had about 100,000 soldiers. The Muslims fought as hard as they could, but they could not prevail. And Khalid ibn Walid brought them back, had them retreat. When they came back, they were treated as people, who had abandoned the battlefield. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam welcomed them and consoled them. And he said, you did not flee. You retreated to join me. You will collect strength and fight with them again. A sense of optimism. This deen is not for you, it's not for me. Allah is the guardian on this deen, and this deen will prevail with you without you, with me, without me. But how much better would it be if by the grace of Allah we set our differences aside, we behave ethically, we behave like uswatun hasana, we behave with akhlaq, we behave with transparency. And in fact, 2 years after that battle, the Muslims dealt a major defeat to the Byzantines, as you know, at the Battle of Yarmouk. So, in conclusion, so I'm going to skip to the end. I'm sorry, I just don't have time. And I'm going to go all the way to the end because maybe inshallah, one day I'll come back and finish this. So, to summarize, serving others in order to better serve Allah and to develop better servants of Allah is at the core of servant leadership. And Muhammad ﷺ was the ultimate servant leader. There are 7 principles of servant leadership for Muslim leaders. First, service before self. Leadership in Islam is about sacrifice. Leadership in Islam is about ethics. Leadership in Islam is about transparency. Secondly, individual consideration and attention to each of the brothers and sisters you're responsible for. Listening as a means of affirmation. Don't ignore people. Never to be too busy for anybody. Creating trust and nurture. You are here to build a community. Fifth, focus on what is feasible to accomplish. Like Muhammad ﷺ did, don't make the deen difficult. You don't have to depart from the truth, but you don't have to make it impossible. Lend a hand. Muhammad ﷺ, it's reported, he used to milk his own goats. He used to sew his own clothes. When some of us go home, we put our big foot on our little foot, and if that dinner is not on the tables, our wife is going to be in trouble. Okay? Prophet ﷺ lent a hand. He was not too proud to lend a hand. And finally, and even when you look at, for example, at Khandak, for example, when they were digging the ditch, who was there with all his companions, carrying balls of soil on his head like everybody else? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And finally, he inspired motivation. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin, wallahu waliyul tawfiq, wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We will still have 10 minutes, so we'll get some questions. Yes, go ahead, inshallah.
You have to speak really loud because
my question is about, I don't know if you addressed this before, one of the things that I have seen in my involvement is the leadership which is there originally when they built the masjid is still there. It's the old, quote-unquote, old boys network. And generally, the newcomers are not given way to come in. And you will see in all of the subs that we go to, most of the time you see the immigrants. So we are telling people, the young
yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hear you because the sound is bouncing around.
What I'm saying is, one of the things that I have noticed over the years is that most of the time, the masajids have people who build them, these people are still running. If I were to look at the board of directors of this budget, I would say on 30, at least 50% of people are still there. It's quote-unquote old boys network which is still there, which is keeping the newcomers out, especially the locals. We are still seeing immigrants running the masajid. Can you share some thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. I mean, not just masjid, but Islamic organizations. And part of it is a lot of these brothers, I mean, with sincere intention sometimes, they feel that they started it, it's their baby, and they want to keep it succeeding. The only problem with that hypothesis is that unless you're willing to take a chance, how can the brothers and sisters develop? They can't, right? When you look at the example of Abu Dhar, the one that I just cited, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that Abu Dhar was not ready. He was a new Muslim. But at the same time, there's another example where this companion, this new Muslim, this person had been Muslim for only about 6 months or so, was appointed commander of the Muslim army over more seasoned veterans, because for that battle, he was the best leader. He was the most qualified leader. So there are two questions here. One is the issue of leadership succession. The other one is the issue of competence. So Muslim organizations sometimes have this cult of personality. And I'm not going to mention names because you probably know them. And I'll mention the organizations because you can realize ICNA went through a horrible time. Great founders, major problems, until it's fixed. Now ICNA has fixed its own problems. ISNA went through the same thing. MSA went through the same thing. We have trouble at some point in time saying enough is enough. I have served 2 terms. If by the grace of Allah, like Muhammad did at Dar al-Arqam, I have done my job and I've coached these brothers and sisters correctly, they should be able to take over and run the organization. Clearly there's an incremental process, but that incremental process has to start somewhere. If a volunteer comes to a leader and the brother invites volunteers or sisters, and once the volunteers come and says, brother, just sit in the corner there. Whenever we dream up of something, we'll call on you. That's the end of that volunteer. That's why there has to be a whole training program where you bring them in slowly. When I was in college, do you know what my first responsibility was? I actually had a title. It's a long title. I was assistant secretary for procuring the meat for the dinner on the 3rd Saturday of every month. That was my title. But because people gave me responsibility and trusted me not to mess up, by the grace of Allah, I did it. And I'm sure my dear brother Wright probably started somewhere like that. But you have to give responsibility. You have to take a chance. So that's one. The other thing is, there's a hadith of Prophet ﷺ. And this is reported actually in Ibn Taymiyyah, where the Prophet ﷺ says, if a Muslim appoints somebody to a position of authority when there is somebody else out there who is more competent, verily in truth he has betrayed Allah and his apostle and his messenger and the whole ummah. Nepotism has no place in Islam. You are from my family, so I will give you a position. Or you are from my village, they'll give you a position. But that brother or sister out there who knows what he or she is doing will not get it. So there are multiple things happening. One is the cult of personality, and we need to lose it. Secondly, leaders have to be mature enough to realize, if I have served 2 terms, step down, brother. Let somebody else do it. But of course, you don't give it to somebody who's incompetent. You've trained them, like Muhammad ﷺ did at Arqam. So now that brother or that sister is ready. And thirdly, there has to be development of competencies. Remember the hadith I cited during my khutbah today. Allah loves it that when a Muslim does something, that he does it in the most excellent manner. That when you appoint a brother, you know, I have come across young brothers, and I love but they will go like, the sentence starts like something like this: you all-timers, And that's when I really feel like I'm from the Jurassic era, you know. You old-timers should step down and let us, the youth, take over. I don't mind, and I've never minded doing that, as long as the brother or sister is telling me that has reached a certain level of maturity and competence to do that. Another question.
So because of misunderstanding, Mr. A is apologizing to Mr. B, and instead of accepting apology, he's throwing the whole resume on the face of Mr. A and telling, I'm this, I'm that. How can you talk to that?
That's an ocean unto itself, isn't it? You know, when we go back to, we're talking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam right now, right? Let's go back to Sirah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and look at what he did. The Quraysh boycotted him. They starved him and the followers. They basically forced him, in a sense, to leave Mecca. They a lot of the people who left Mecca left everything behind. They plotted to assassinate him. And yet, we come to the liberation of Mecca. And what does he do? What does he do? He tells them to go in peace. Again, look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anybody been to Taif? Anybody been to Taif? When you go to, you know, you've been to Taif. You know what I'm talking about when I say there are lots of rocks there. I mean, you walk, there are lots of rocks there. You know where I'm getting to. Any one of you ever been thrown rocks at? Anyone? Been thrown rocks out by another brother or sister? Like you were standing in the parking lot and Brother Raid started grabbing rocks and throwing at you? No, did you do that, Brother Raid? No, probably not. Okay. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is at Taif. And he's trying to spread the deen. And they set the kids after him. And he's pelted with rocks until and he's bleeding until his shoes fill up with blood. And he takes refuge in this garden. And the angels come to him. And they offer him what? And for you who have been to Taif, you know what I'm talking about. When you go to do Umrah or to do Hajj, stop at Taif. They offer to crumble those mountains on those miscreants. And what does Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? This is why he's uswatun hasana. This is why Allah says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, no, perchance the progeny might become Muslims. 10 years ago, I was in Taif. And I went to Salatul Jum'ah. Huge masjid like this one. And as I looked at all these people praying, a thought occurred to me. Some of them are the descendants of the very people who tried to stone our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because he did not forget that he was a mercy to mankind. Because he did not forget his mission. Because he did not forget that as Muslims, we are only accountable to Allah. If somebody looks at you wrong, if somebody stepped on your feet while you went outside, going out to, you know, if somebody did not invite you to their daughter's wedding, so what? So what? They did worse to our Prophet ﷺ, and he forgave them. He forgave them at Taif, he forgave them at Mecca.
Inshallah,
I think that's
think the time, inshallah, is over. Just we want to, before we break for Salah, thank our dear brother, Dr. Rafik Beekun, for his lecture, inshallah. This is what we call a teaser. We'll bring him back for a full version, inshallah, of this program, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.